That's exactly, I completely agree. Like, you have to be cautious. You have to be wary of the implications of your actions.
But like a
Often,
weapons permit, that kind of makes sense. A driver's permit, your license or whatever, those things make sense because they're dangerous things if you don't know what you're doing.
2020, if you're a black guy walking around with a shotgun in the streets, you could be shot for that. And that's bullshit.
A modest sized governing body that, you know, focuses on a particular thing and knows about that thing, and then you have to go to them to consult on that thing. That makes sense to me.
There's so many regulations and legislation created by people who know nothing about the field in which they're regulating and legislating.
Welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford, and you know you want to like and share the video because you already know it's going to be awesome, and that's why you're going to watch the whole thing. And if you haven't subscribed already, maybe you're not as awesome as I thought you were.
Yeah, I would sure hope you're awesome. I mean, you want to be awesome, right? We all do.
Stop with the peer pressure, man.
Yeah. But yeah, hey, stick around to the end of the episode because we write our own music and there's going to be some kind of new song at the end. Check it out. And our music's available on iTunes and Spotify and such places. So yeah, if you want that, you can go there and pick it up, or you can visit our website, ksmvidcast.com, for news and information and more. So, Casey, what do you think we should talk about today?
Well, tomorrow is America Day.
America Day? You mean the July 4th?
Yeah, the July of the 4th.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe one of our recurring themes of liberty might be something good to kind of focus on and just kind of go over the meaning of, you know, what liberty means to you, what liberty means to me, what liberty
I think that
insurance companies.
I think that's a local company, but if anybody recognizes that tune, chime in. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think we've been talking about it for a while. That's been kind of on our list for some time, I think. And it's something that comes up fairly often, that idea. I guess we could start. I think we should start by defining what it means to us, because it does mean different things to different people, and that's really important when you're talking about it, because people say liberty as if everybody knows what that means. Well, it's subjective. So, yeah.
Right, and then you have the root of the word, shares some similarities with the word liberal, and that has a whole other connotation in our politics that, in some people's views, doesn't really have much to do with liberty at all. So,
well, yeah, and that's the thing, when it becomes politicized, I think the definition starts to drift a bit.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess let's ignore the political side of it, because yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. That would be that deserves its own episode, actually. What is your kind of, like, just in general, what's your definition of liberty? Like, liberty and justice for all. Like, what do you think of liberty in that sense?
uh I think that, I mean, wow, that's like a broad concept to try to draw into words, but
It is.
you know, if I had to pick some words to put together to explain what it means to me, I think it's just uh to not feel overly constrained, by anyone. Um, like you've got the freedom to move about as you please within, you know, legal terms. Like it makes sense that you can't just like wander into a top secret facility and stuff, because then it wouldn't be top secret. Uh,
Maybe it shouldn't be, but that's yet again another episode. Or,
yeah.
somebody's private property, like just traipsing over through somebody's backyard or
Well,
something like that.
actually, I mean, when it comes to property, like sensitive materials and stuff like that, where it's posted top secret, classified area or whatever, as long as that's actually hiding something secret, I see no reason to breach that. But as far as like people's property, I I actually kind of side with Sweden on. It's been a few years since I studied Swedish, but so I might butcher the pronunciation. But they have a concept called Allesmansrätt, or rat. Allesmans. Anyway, it translates in English to every man's right, and
Mhm.
you basically have the right to go anywhere, even onto other people's property, as long as you're not screwing it up. So if you just want to walk through somebody's backyard, if they've got a nice little creek there and you want to sit on a rock and just listen to the water, they'll just walk outside and be like, "Hey, hey," you know. I think
Yeah,
that's cool.
I guess I can kind of see the validity in that. If you're just passing through, um,
I mean, the key element there is as long as you're not screwing it up, you know.
yeah, and then of course it depends on the scale of things. If you're talking about a person's 100-acre piece of property, well, that's a little bit different than somebody's tiny little plot of land where they have barely any grass around their house and somebody's just chilling in their backyard. Like, well, that's kind of feels a little bit like a transgression at that point. So, I think it's
Yeah,
on a case by case basis, I
it's
guess, in that regard.
cultural. Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
because I live in this small town right now at the time of this recording, and I see people, like, now that I've been working from home and stuff with COVID-19, I see people constantly walking through my yard, like total strangers, letting their dogs take a piss like in the middle of our yard for some reason. Like, why can't you just do it on the edge of the lawn? Like, you don't
Mhm.
walk all the way back here. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's just cultural that makes me like bristle a little, but I don't really have a problem with it because they're not hurting anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
And
could
it's like
see that
there's like
maybe.
barriers, like the door. If they can't just like open your door and wander in and like ransack your fridge or something like that.
Well, okay, yeah, that is definitely crossing the line, I think.
Yeah.
But there have been like people drunk or high, homeless people like passed out in my driveway, and I'm just like, I don't care, whatever. As long as you don't stay here too long, I'm fine.
Hmm.
Just chill. I don't mind. But some people do, and that's a complex kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's cultural.
Yeah.
Um,
But anyway, in a roundabout way, that kind of sums up my ideas of liberty. Is just kind of like, don't screw with other people,
mhm.
but you have to also recognize the boundaries that they put up and the boundaries that are, have some kind of legal necessity for order and things like that. And so there's kind of like a balance, a give and take. It's like you can have uh, as much liberty as it takes to be a functionally free person, but not so much that you can just do whatever you want, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, that's the best way I can put it, I guess.
Yeah.
Simply, at least.
No, it sounds. I think that's pretty reasonable. Um,
What
yeah.
what's your take? Unless you had something to expound upon.
Oh, I probably do, but this beer is a little bit alcoholic, so I may have lost my train of thought. Um, hmm. So my take basically on liberty is all human beings should be free to do whatever they want as long as they're not transgressing in some way, like certain specific ways on other people, right? Like you can do whatever you want. You want to blow up a stump in your yard. Yeah, go ahead. But don't blow up somebody else's stump or their fence or something like that. You can't steal, rape, murder, that kind of stuff. Like all those things are bad. But anything else you want to do, if it's something you agree with somebody to do, it's totally okay. Um, that's why I feel so strongly about legalizing prostitution and drug use. I think that's a victimless thing. It's
Yeah.
I think people should be totally allowed to do that. You should be allowed to have whatever you want, do whatever you want, as long as you're not harming somebody else or initiating force against another person or something along those lines. Like people have the term force is it requires a little bit of explanation, but um putting somebody in a cage is force. Taking stuff from somebody, the fruits of their labor, that's force. Destroying their property, something they've made, that's force.
Mm-hmm.
um Walking through their property, like I don't care. Like if somebody walks through my yard and hops over the fence and keeps on going, I'm like, "Well, whatever. It doesn't matter." Yes, technically it's trespassing, but I don't give a shit
Yeah.
because you didn't do anything. You're passing through. I mean, you have to gravity, Jesus. You have to cross some property somewhere to get from one place to another. So I think it's okay. It's what you do along the way that matters the most. Yeah, if somebody wants to sit down at your creek and drink some water, I think that's pretty okay because there's enough water to go around. But if they walk into your back door, open your fridge, and grab a bottle of water that you paid money for, well, it's a little bit different. Or if they drink your beer, nope, can't, nope.
Party foul.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like we have a pretty similar interpretation of liberty. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I just, when you said if you want to blow up a stump, you should be able to, I just immediately had a thought because I always look at life like a chessboard. I'm like, what moves are going to come three ahead of this, and I started thinking like, well, if you don't ask for permission, and let's say you're like a total luddite, like you have no common sense whatsoever, but you want to blow up the stump, so you just go and buy some dynamite or whatever, and you stick it next to the stump and you blow it up, and it takes this gaping hole in the ground that like strikes a gas main and levels your entire block.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Well, and
that has like created a liberty problem for your neighbors now.
that's exactly. I completely agree. Like you have to be cautious. You have to be wary of the implications of your actions. Um, and I, that's the thing. It's like I think people should be free to do anything they want, but you can't do anything you want. You have to take consideration for everybody around you, your neighbors, your fellow humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. Yes, I think I people constantly ask me, well, what about nukes? Yeah, people should have nukes, but detonating a nuke uh, has repercussions. So you have to consider that if you're going to blow up an atomic bomb and it injures people and destroys the ecosystem, well, that's a transgression. That's essentially initiating force against other people against their will. Like they had no say in the matter, and that's wrong. So
Well,
I think
what about licensing? Do you feel like that infringes on liberty, or you think like because where I'm going with this is like, what if we were allowed to have nukes, but you had to go through a really strict licensure sort of procedure to, show that you know how to handle it and you're
yeah.
not going to blow people up and stuff like that,
Well, I think that might. I mean that's at least somewhat reasonable, because it does allow the option. But the problem with licensing is who issues licenses and who determines the criteria for such issuance. Um, you as soon as you start, because licensing, well, I'll probably do a video about occupational licensing and how it harms small business and upstart people. But I don't know.
Well,
I
yeah,
feel
but
like
these
there's
licenses, you're just paying a fee for a license. It's not like you're proving you know how to run a business. Those are
wait,
stupid. But
yeah, that does tend to be kind of the case
but like a
often.
weapons permit, that kind of makes sense. A driver's permit, license or whatever, those things make sense because they're dangerous things if you don't know what you're doing.
Well, that's true, and well, like in Washington State, at least prior to some recent legislation, you basically had to pay a fee, and bam, you got a concealed pistol license. Um, FBI background check, you had to get fingerprinted and all this other stuff, but there was no like classes involved or anything like that. Um,
Oh, are there
which
now?
there, I think that's actually I've got to review the stuff that happened recently, but I think that's part of it, which I guess I'm okay with. I just
I mean, it doesn't prevent anyone from getting it. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't impinge on the right because it's not saying you can't do it. You just have to do this first, and then you
no, but what
be
if
responsible.
you're poor? What if you don't have enough money? Because it does cost actually a lot of money when you're talking about some of these things,
You don't
especially if
have
you
enough
go
money
down.
for that. You don't have enough money for a gun.
Well, you could buy like a high point for $120.
Well,
So
what's
yeah,
a what's the CPL? $30, $60?
60, yeah, or more depending. But then if you involve the classes, you're adding more. And there's people that are living paycheck to paycheck. They might be living in like uh fairly dangerous neighborhood, inner city kind of stuff, and they might want to defend themselves, and they should have that right. And to impose all these costs does diminish their ability to do that. And especially when you're talking like may issue states, which our state is a shall issue state, which really matters. Um, the law enforcement can deny that in a may issue state.
Or
You
concealed.
basically have to beg and plead to get the ability to carry a firearm to defend yourself. And I
To
think that's a
conceal.
problem, especially for like people with limited financial resources. And don't get me started on the racist origins of gun laws. Oh,
Well, yeah, like
I,
the economics and all that stuff. There's a lot of factors that need to be fixed to address that more than whether or not there's classes and licenses. But this is all for concealed. Like if you have all you have is $120 to your name, you can go buy a cheap shotgun to protect yourself at home, and you can technically carry it out in the open too.
that's true. Well, in most states, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Washington State is open carry; it's no problem.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. Although it does come with some potential pitfalls. If unfortunately, in this day and age, 2020, if you're a black guy walking around with a shotgun in the streets, you could be shot for that, and that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Um, we, current events and all this stuff, like we probably at some point should probably talk about the whole police training thing, because
Yeah. Well,
man,
I was just looking this up today because of all the riots and protests going on, and there was recently all the protests against staying home for the COVID-19 thing, where there was like a bunch of protests going on with people not wearing masks, but they were wearing AK-47s around their necks and just standing on the stairs of these government buildings and stuff, and they weren't getting harassed at all, even though they're effectively brandishing weapons. And I was like, are they brandishing weapons? And I looked up Washington state law, and yes, they are. And
well,
they weren't.
brandishing is like a very particular term.
It varies from state
Carrying
to state.
isn't brandishing. There's brand.
It's interpretation. If it can be construed as something that's meant to intimidate, which,
Yeah,
if there's 50 guys standing just loitering with AK-47s, like they're not going for a nice sunny day walk, it
but
could
that's that.
be intimidating.
That in itself, on an individual basis, isn't necessarily brandishing. If you just have a rifle strapped to your back, you're not like doing anything with intent to intimidate necessarily. I mean,
Yeah,
again, it's like subjective. So there's
yeah,
big problems with that because you could be shot for that.
right.
So that's where I have a
Yeah,
huge problem. Like,
I actually think it's kind of foolhardy that they go and do that stuff because it could go bad real quick.
well, there's the guy that walked into a police station holding an AK. There's a video of that, and oh my god! And the cops, by the way, behaved completely chill about it, like very professional. So rare cases where shit didn't go south.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I see as brandishing with it, because they've got these straps on, right? And they're holding it, and they've got, not on the trigger, but it's like trigger ready. Like, you don't need to be doing that if you have a strap on. You can just be chilling with your hands in your pockets and your guns on your back, and you just have it just in case. But when you're doing this, that to me is like, I'm ready to shoot at a moment's notice. And
well,
that sends up red flags. That sounds dangerous to me, especially when you're counter protesting peaceful protesters who are having something to say about black people being, picked on by the police or whatever, and then these guys with AKs show up and stand across the street and just stare at them. That feels like brandishing to me.
well, yeah. I mean, it's all subjective. But by the way, the other people weren't wearing that many masks as well. So there's a bunch of crazy bullshit there, like social distancing. Like what happened to that? Oh, God. Yeah. So I think we're kind of drifting a little bit in this regard. Let's see where.
But we got into licensing and stuff. So
Yeah, licensing. I think licensing is used as a like a bludgeoning weapon against competitors, but
yeah, I mean, a lot of it's stupid, like house codes and stuff. Like, oh, your awning is 16th of an inch too close to the alley or something. Come
Mhm.
on, like
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
that's just a cash
exactly.
grab, but
Well, and
like
the fact
I was
that
saying with the stump, some stuff makes total sense. Like,
well, a lot of this, the big things are kind of common sense kind of things.
right,
But the little like nickel and diming kind of things, like little nitpicky stuff, which it's like I don't understand. Like all you have to do is pay some money and everything's okay. Well, that doesn't make any sense. That all you should have to prove through some method. Obviously, different situations are going to be different. If you're building a house, it's going to be different than if you're talking about like operating a business or uh, I don't know, drilling for oil on your property. um, they're all going to be different situations. All you should have to do is prove that what you're doing is legit, and that should be the end of it.
yeah,
Um, but it's almost I yeah I think that that might ooh yeah I think Let's go on to some other things, I think, because I feel like this could be yet another
Yeah, I was just
if film
about to go
episode.
into like building sub basements and stuff, and like whether or not that should be on the city's radar or.
Well, and there you heard about the guy that like tunneled under his house and dug like 4 stories of tunnels under his house over the course of like 40 years or something like that. Yeah.
I would
Uh,
totally love to do that, but like I also know that you could totally screw up like the infrastructure of the soil and hit something bad or I
well,
don't
and that's one thing. Like the making a mistake could cost you your life or somebody else's, but you learn things from it, and that's the
know.
thing.
You're
Like
dead.
we still operate. This is the problem I have with a lot of the way we do things today. In fact, I think this is probably. Wait a minute. I need a little bit of beer for this. I think this probably goes to the core of the problem I have with the way the structure is today. Is that it still operates as if it's like the 1800s. It's like, wait, we have the internet, we have Google, we have YouTube. There's countless resources out there to learn anything you want, to know how to do things. You want to do anything. There's 1,000 videos showing you how to do it and how not to do it, like failures and all this stuff.
And
Um,
yet no one does.
well, some people do. You just have to use the resources. Um, and there's for as far as like consumer report style things, there's all kinds of review sites reviewing products and companies and all this stuff. But yet we still act like those things don't exist. And I think it's time to come into the 21st century. Um, maybe maybe it's time to ease up a little bit on some of these things and utilize the resources, the tools that we have now. I don't know, just just thought that I have there.
Yeah, no, I mean I get where you're coming from, but it's like it's that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Like everyone's got reasonable access to the internet. It's just you can't make them go, uh, you know, alleviate their ignorance by
Well,
using.
okay. Here's my question for that then. Um, how does licensing fix that? Because you don't like. Yes, I know I have to have a license. I know I have to have a license to do things, certain things, but I could just do them anyway, regardless. Like, there's nothing physically stopping me from digging a hole under my house or something like that, or detonating dynamite on a stump in my yard. Like, if I have the ability, I could still do it without a license. So the license to me seems really kind of outdated and irrelevant. Um, I
I
don't
mean,
know. Just
I think so. Like a license for driving and stuff. Of course, you go through classes and
yeah.
maybe even in some certain situations with guns. But when it comes to like a license for doing something like blowing up a tree stump, you're basically, I think, paying to have somebody evaluate it for you, so you don't have to go and learn all that. They can just take a look at all the maps and the blueprints and the underground what's it's and say, yeah, go ahead, or
Well,
no, you'll kill everyone. You know.
but that's true. But like with building permits and stuff like that, I can still do those things without there is no physical barrier stopping me from like building an addition to my house. That somebody has to notice that and come and stop me. It,
Right. But
it's actually, I don't
when
know.
that happens, though, then you have to like either pay hefty fines or tear it down and do it correctly, or you get inconvenienced at some point. It's just, when do you want to deal with it?
That's
it
true. That's
it's
true. But I just don't
um,
think it. I don't think it's like a perfect solution. I think it's actually kind of like a shitty solution, honestly. Like it really, it
I mean, depending on the circumstance, I can see the philosophy of asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
I was gonna mention that. Yeah,
But
yeah. Well,
um,
yeah, and it goes back to the whole like who writes the rules.
well, that
Like,
that philosophy I wanted to discuss, because I feel like that almost that almost like throws a brick wall into an argument. Like it might be some kind of cognitive um, fallacy of sorts, because it's like, where does that stop? Like, who watches the watchers sort of fallacy? Like, like who watches the watchers that watch the watchers? It could go on forever and ever and ever, and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a red herring to just throw you off the real point. It's like a governing body is typically made up of several minds, and several minds are better than one. And if you just leave everything up to an individual which has a very good probability of being completely ignorant on something, you're going to have lots of problems. But if you have a modest sized governing body that, you know, focuses on a particular thing and knows about that thing, and then you have to go to them to consult on that thing, that makes sense to me. And
Well,
that's who should be doing that, you know?
okay, I will agree, but the problem that I see with that is that the governing body isn't composed of people who know things about things. They're politicians, they're bureaucrats, they're not experts in their fields. Like
Some of them are.
some, but you don't have to be one of those people to wield that authority. So
Betsy DeVos.
yeah. I, that's the issue that I have, is that it doesn't necessarily, it's not a requirement that you're industry expert or something like that, and yet you basically dictate whether somebody can do something or not. And I think that's actually a huge problem. There's so many regulations and legislation created by people who know nothing about the field in which they're regulating and legislating. They don't know shit. They don't know any more than you and I do about those things. Yet apparently they're the authority, and we have to
but how do you know
accept whatever they say.
I mean, just because they don't personally know, how do you know they aren't consulting someone else within the government that does know?
Well, but how do you know that they're well, of course you don't know, but you don't know that they actually are. Like there's no like requirement that somebody have some kind of connection with a particular industry. And then if they do, here's the other thing. What about corruption? What if somebody comes in and they have a connection to the industry, but they want to make sure that their particular business or their business interests prevail? So they're going to use their knowledge to prevent anybody else from being able to enter that field, or to be able to do something without having to come to them. That's a quandary that we run into with
Well,
it.
yeah, but that's not a problem with the process itself. It's a problem from, you know, outside corruption.
Well, it is a problem with the process itself because it allows that kind of corruption. That's the thing. That's my point. Is like, is there a better way to do things? Because I think there is.
Burn it
I
down,
just,
start again.
huh?
Burn it down, start again.
Yeah. Well, probably. We should.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a really good way to do things. Like just appeal to tradition. Like what? Because we've been doing this for 200 years, we have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't worked that well, actually. Yeah.
There almost should be like if we did burn it down and start again, I think there should be like an inbuilt self-destruct, you know, like every 100 years you have to start all over again. You know,
So like a governmental Logan's Run.
I mean,
Your hand starts flashing and then you die. You know?
I mean,
I like it. I think it's a good idea.
yeah, I mean, like the times change so unpredictably. Like even 100 years might be too long to like start over. Just kind of depends on the exponential growth of whatever is influencing the policy. But um, like technology is just
Sure.
grows out of control. It's crazy, and it has such an impact on it. Like it's totally ingrained in our lives now. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are people who don't even remember needing to pull out a roadmap, you know,
Yeah.
to find
Yeah,
out.
yeah, the internet really has changed things.
Yeah, so it's just, you know, like we can hang on to certain concepts, like the idea of liberty can be carried over into the new way that we do things, but we need a new way to do things.
Well, I think that that's ultimately the scientific way to do stuff. Like you test, you perform experiments, and you evaluate, and that's how you do it. If you're not doing that, then it's not scientific and it's probably not valid.
Yeah, I mean, like I think, you know, like without trying to talk about politics too much, you know, the whole two-party system, both of them think things need to be fixed. So I think we can all agree we're just trying to polish a turd at this point.
Yeah.
So, so we really just need to start over. Our economy is
Oh,
screwed up, you know, like all kinds of inflation. There's, you know, no, you know, we're using reserve notes instead of actual like solid gold standards or anything
the
like that.
treasury notes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, everything's in disarray. Nobody can agree on anything. So it really just needs to get to a point where everybody, and I mean like the people, everybody,
Hmm.
you know, has some way of focusing what they want toward the top and hold the top accountable for making it, you know, at least good for now. And then
Yeah.
reevaluate it when the times are a changing, you know.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I mean, I don't know why you would necessarily defer to other people to decide the destiny of your life, but to each their own. Um, and I totally agree that the whole two-party thing is a huge problem because it creates this kind of divide between people who would otherwise get along.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about it, if you ignore politics, like 99% of people would get along in some way. They'd find some common ground. But all of a sudden, you know, a Republican finds out somebody's a Democrat and they hate each other, and vice versa. Like, why? The thing is, you're right. They everybody kind of agrees there are things that need attention. They just have different ways of approaching it, albeit probably fairly flaccid, limp dick, and ineffectual ways of approaching it, but nevertheless, they have different ways of approaching it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and but yet people never really focus on the problems they want to solve and independently come up with solutions and you know, like how can we actually solve these things, like what's wrong and what are the causes and what can we do. No, it just turns into politics, and it's like left, right, you know, D's and R's and blue and red team and all this, and like nothing ever gets done. Fuck. we I've been watching a bunch of old campaign ads from the 60s, and they're talking about the same shit we're still talking about today. And they're like, well, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix poverty. I'm going to fix this. And they're like, well, okay, my entire life, you have not been able to fix it. So do you have the ability, or are you a shill? Are you a complete shithead that can't actually do anything?
well, and
And I would go with the latter, honestly.
if you point to another country that's fixed some of that stuff, like I think Denmark or something, or the Netherlands, one of the two, they have a city that completely fixed homelessness, and it's
Mhm.
like, well, why don't we try that? Well, no, that would never work here. Well, why don't we try it?
Well, at least here's the thing. This is a big country. We have 1,000 Denmarks in this country. So why not try it on a small scale? You know, like
Well, even
see,
Denmark did it on a small scale. It's just a city.
well, but I mean, we could do a whole Denmark's worth of stuff, and it wouldn't really matter in the grand scheme of things in the U.S. So yeah, that's a good point. Like, why don't we experiment a bit and try some of these different ideas and see if it works? Why
Yeah,
does it have to be the entire country or nothing? I
I don't
I
know.
don't understand
I
that.
I don't know how effectual that would be, because if we tried it in Houston, Texas, then every other city would be like, well, that would never work here because we're not Houston.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, and that okay, to some extent, I can understand that. Like, you can't necessarily make comparisons, like geographical comparisons or cross cultural comparisons. There are things that are different, but
I don't know how
it de-
different they are, though. I mean,
well, yeah,
you know, when it
it
comes to something like
depends.
homelessness and, providing shelter for another human being, I don't see how geography or population density or anything alters that.
But probably not so much like that particular example in the modern world, in like first world countries, I think is pretty universal between countries. But there are some other things that might be different. So, but that's the whole thing. It's like, to actually analyze things takes work. Like, you actually have to work. You have to think. You have to look at things and collect data and understand what's going on. You know, but everybody wants a magic bullet, like, just, push the easy button. That was easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. You actually have to think.
I just got a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
The new way of doing government should be operated just like scientific research.
Yeah.
You have to apply to the people for grants for new experiments, and you got to keep doing experiments. You got to publish or perish. If you
Yeah.
don't, if you don't keep publishing data that shows that you're trying different ways of doing things and proving whether or not they will work and where they will work and where they won't work, then you perish and you have to start over because like the scientific method is basically built on the fundamental idea that you can always do it better, and we got to
Yeah.
keep looking.
Well, it's like a Kaizen kind of thing, like constant improvement. I like that idea. I think that's maybe there could be a better system, but that is a vast improvement upon what we have right now,
Yeah.
which is basically like, oh, did you get votes? Okay, you could pass legislation. You don't have to prove anything.
Right.
Oh, now all of a sudden you're God.
I mean, think of
Um,
that. Like the people could be the peer review.
mhm.
You basically come to the people every so often and have town meetings or whatever to present your data and say, all right, let's put it to a vote. You have the data here in front of you. These are our conclusions. You draw your own interpretations. Should we do it this way?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. I think that it's certainly a step above what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, why don't people just subscribe to the kitchen sink microscopy party of politics?
we should totally do that. Let's run. What?
Actually kind of hard to make a political party. I did actually look into making a kitchen sink party.
Of course he did.
I thought about running for governor. And
Oh, nice.
I was like, I got to go on the KSM platform.
Well, it's a little bit like religions, like kitchen, chicken and egg kind of thing. Like, yeah,
The kitchen and the sink, which came first?
yeah. Basically, you already have to have an established religion to be considered a religion, and the same thing with politics. You have to have an established political party, whatever that means, to be considered a political party. I don't know why you can't just be somebody with ideas. Seems to me that that's actually at the core of the issues with politics. That it's divisive, or divisive. I don't know. Potato, potato. Yeah. Oh man.
Divisive.
Yeah. Divisive. Oh god. Yeah. I don't think there's like, one of the problems too, especially in a place like the U.S., like a country this big and this diverse, and like spanning thousands of miles and crossing the sea and Canada, eh? Um, I don't know that there's like a one size fits all form of governance. Somebody's always going to be marginalized when you have that. We're not all the same. And then, well, don't get me started on whether governance really is even necessary to begin with. And oh, we'll skip that. That'll be for another episode yet again. um, here's a question. This is something that I think about because we're talking about Independence Day and all this stuff, and people are like freedom, waving the American flag and stuff like that. What do you think it means to be free?
Oh man. I kind of like the freedom index thing that a couple of libertarians came up with. And I mean,
Yeah, that's a good one.
it actually shows that there's a great deal of countries that are more free than we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they just kind of based it on economic freedom and personal freedom.
Yeah.
I might be paraphrasing, but
Yeah, I think that's pretty
yeah,
close
I
to what
mean,
it is.
like
Yeah.
I feel weird about 2 data points being what you draw conclusions on freedom as being, but I mean, I
Well,
can't
especially
really.
because it's so subjective.
Yeah, I
Like everybody has different ideas, and I kind of want to talk about that too. But go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I see stuff like there's so many arguments about what's free and what's not, and it to me freedom is not free, and I don't mean that soldiers paid for it with their lives. What I mean by that is that you have responsibilities that you have to provide to earn those freedoms. Like I don't think freedom is should be just an entitlement, because when you feel entitled, you kind of tend to skulk your responsibilities, and I think people should be on the hook for conducting themselves in a civilized manner in order to maintain whatever they consider free to be, like um but I
Yeah.
mean, like
Well,
moving about as you wish, and saying what you want, and I, I like the idea of just saying the right to defend yourself. I don't like putting an invention on it. I don't like.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, like I just want the Second Amendment to be you can defend yourself, and like,
Yeah. Well, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
yeah. And like, yeah, I just some things need to be a little simpler, some things need to be a little more specific, but we're never gonna get it perfect. We're never gonna get it right exactly.
No, well, that's the thing is like we're not all a bunch of gurus. We don't know everything.
Mhm.
No one person knows everything, and no one person knows what's right for everybody because I
I'll
don't
tell
think
you
it's
I'll tell
possible.
you the one thing that I absolutely know for certain that I need to be free, and that's that a soldier can't knock on my door and sleep in my bed.
Third Amendment. Yeah. Oh God.
You'll take that over my cold dead hands.
uh, well, I mean, I'd be okay if she was hot. But anyway, that's going in a different direction. Yeah, that's a pretty good point. So people always say, United States is the freest country, freedom. We're so free. Do you actually think we're really free in this country?
I mean, we're up there. Uh,
Yeah. Well, but
we're
I
not we're not the freest in the world. We're not the greatest in the world. We're not the happiest in the world.
well,
We're not the
just
richest,
because I
smartest
don't
in the world.
I don't beat you every day, just some days. So,
Yeah. I
I
mean, I think ultimately what I really think is uh geographically speaking, countries make sense to me, so you can point to a place and say what it is and where it is. But as far as borders go and this whole competitive nature, like we're number one, we're better than every other country, that's bullshit. I hate it.
Oh, I
It's
totally agree. And I
so
was going to do,
subjective. Like,
yep.
if you think America's the greatest country in the world, you're absolutely right. I don't. I'm absolutely right. It's up to each individual, you know.
Well, yeah, it totally is. And it's all subjective. It depends on what you desire out of life, which everybody has different wants and needs in that regard. So, you know, and everybody has a different interpretation of what freedom is. Like, what does it mean to be free? What is liberty? Like, well, it depends. It comes down to what you believe and what you want and stuff, and everybody wants different things. So, uh, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it, in the absence of ever hearing a better plan, uh, the way we go about determining it, as imperfect as it is, it just seems like, sadly, the most rational thing that we've uh, been able to agree on, at least. Like
well, yeah, and I would say like a representative system, like a republic and democracy and stuff like that. There's benefits there, but why set the bar so low? Okay, we've accomplished this. We should strive to be better. It's the whole Kaizen thing, like constant improvement. You should always be looking to make things better. And essentially, what we've done for the last 200 years is say, "Oh yeah, we figured it out. Um, our work is done here. Let's go home." And it's not. Like, we're human beings, and the people that built this particular system in the US, they were flawed. They had good ideas and they had bad ideas. And it's our job as their descendants to analyze what's going on and try to make improvements and tweak the system a little bit, and maybe see, like, did it work, did it not, maybe we need to split things up a little bit.
yeah.
It's just like, I have a problem with things being so black and white. um yeah, I feel.
I mean, there's so many ways you could go with just philosophical governance. Um, I mean, you could argue that voting should be some kind of like gradient. Like if there's this 80% super majority, we're going to go with that idea. If it falls between 60 and 80, we're going to make X amount of tweaks to it so it accommodates the other 60% of people that don't like it. If it falls between 40 and 60, blah blah blah, you know, that might be a good idea. Or, like, I mean, but you add complexity to these things coupled with the size of the country, and then you've got another whole host of problems to come with
Well,
that.
that's true. I do like that idea. Like, maybe we should try a few different things from time to time. But the important thing is it should be limited. It's a limited experiment. Um, it's not like we test one rocket and all of a sudden we build 1,000 and we're flying to the moon on them. You no, you it's evolution.
Yeah.
And it isn't right for everybody, because it's like, I fucking hate onions, and but if everybody voted for onions, I gotta eat them. So that's a big problem. I,
Well,
I think there should be wiggle room, I guess, in
if
that
if
regard.
you rewrote the Constitution,
Hmm.
I don't even want to call it Constitution. Well, let's call it Constitution. If you rewrote the Constitution, burned it down, and started over,
Hmm.
what would be the first line of the Constitution that you would write?
Well, I believe in conceptual systems, like we should build things around what we hope to accomplish. Um, and I think above all, letting people be who they are is really important. Um, Not initiating force against other people is really important. Um, Man, that's a tough one. But I would build it around, rather than like rules and regulations, I would build it around philosophies. I'd say, here's the kind of world we want. We want a world of peace. We want a world of togetherness where we trade and we get along and we work together, and that's it. And then all this other stuff stems from that, these core concepts. And the core concepts should be like the main doctrine, I guess. Like everybody adheres to that. Something simple.
Hmm.
Um, I, as far as specifics, I don't know that I could go into that. I probably will. Maybe I'll think about it tonight or over the next couple months or something like that. I'll come up with something.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
mean, one
I
thing
don't think
just
it
came
should.
to me. That's why I brought it up. Like one philosophy, one line that I would
Mhm.
start the whole thing off with is, until 100% of the people agree that something works, never stop trying to do it better.
Mm, that's a great idea.
And
I like it. Yeah. Well, and I'd throw in something I probably have mentioned a few times, the 10-year-old test. Um, like if you have a piece of legislation that you want passed, before passing that legislation, it has to go through some grade school kids, 10-year-olds, who I believe are competent enough to understand language and nuance and things like that, but not so advanced. They're not like college level. So, uh, you it should be able to be understood and comprehended by basically the bare minimum of society. Otherwise, it's bullshit. It's bunk. Throw it out. Like it doesn't. It can't possibly work. Um, and I think that would go a long way, at least to uh, kind of compelling people writing legislation to write legislation as simple and as clear and concise and brief as possible. Um, yeah, it's just thought, but it's like, they always say ignorance of the law is no excuse, and it's like, well, have you read the law? It's incomprehensible. It's like mumbo jumbo. I can't understand it. Lawyers can't understand it. Judges can't understand it. So why would you expect the average person to comprehend this complete mess?
yeah,
You know, Mm, yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a constitution should have a prime directive like that.
exactly. Yep. Hmm.
Because that like tells you what to do with the document. The
Yeah.
the Constitution we have is basically just like I've said this before. I think it's really just kind of like our own version of the Ten Commandments, basically. It's,
I was actually going to bring that up. That
yeah,
it's
it's just a list of
very
things
similar.
that we need to do, and it's like both specific and too general at the same time, and it's horribly confusing and it's horribly subjective, and
Well, and that's why I believe those kinds of things should be more like philosophical and conceptual
yeah,
at its core. Like, here's what we hope to accomplish. You guys figure it out. Whether it be 10 years down the road or 1,000 years down the road, the concepts are the same because they're human concepts. Like, don't murder somebody. Well, that's fucking obvious. Like, I think everybody can agree, whether it be 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years in the future, that's bad.
yeah,
Um, so start with those kinds of things and then figure out like rules around it that are a little bit more flexible to change with the times. Um, but they should always kind of come back to those core principles of, you know, just basically don't initiate force. That's
Yeah.
what it comes down. It's a simple thing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if the document could just say, "Don't be a dick,"
yeah,
but like then it's like, I mean, if you just said something a little less quirky, something like, uh, "You shall not infringe upon other people's will," or something, like, well, then, I mean, could a 10-year-old be like, "My mom wants me to eat peas, and I don't want to eat peas, so I feel like my rights are being transgressed upon," or something,
well, and
like,
that is where it gets complex, and that's where I think experimentation is really important.
yeah.
Um,
So it's like you do have to have some specifics, but you
sure, but
can't.
it should be based on like really fundamental principles that I same thing with another thing I believe about legislation is you should have like a filter or a flow chart or something like that, that all legislation has to pass through this core set of principles along with a 10-year-old test. Um, does it adhere to those principles, or is it something completely bogus and something just designed to benefit like a few people
Yeah.
or some corporation or something like that?
What about
Um,
this? What if the judicial system had its own prime directive where if if there are more than one way to interpret the law, that case gets thrown out and that law has to be rewritten.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, because
Because ambiguity is definitely an issue.
yeah, the
Um,
ultimate goal should be to erase as much ambiguity as possible. And we
mhm,
just have these laws written in stone with all these like legalese, like just pages and pages of shit that doesn't make sense.
mhm.
And it really only says like two words. And,
Yeah.
and nobody can agree on what those two words actually mean.
Mhm.
And it really just depends on how good they are at arguing and masking logical fallacies as logic,
Yeah.
and swaying a jury or something, and I
Well, and
hate.
that's one of the problems with language. Like, you talk about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or something like that. Um, there's so many ways of seeing what's being said there that it can be interpreted in completely contradictory ways,
Yeah,
just depending on how you read it. And that's a huge problem. Um, so, do you have to sit down and read the context of the founding of the US to understand the Constitution, or should we constantly try to rewrite things in clearer and clearer ways? Like, we should be aiming for clarity,
yeah,
not ambiguity.
yeah. I mean, it's important to look at history to see, only to see what went wrong.
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
shouldn't you shouldn't be looking at it to see what went right, because that only worked in the context of its time.
Hmm.
But when things go wrong, that tends to be kind of static in space
Well,
time. Like things that go
yeah.
wrong just tend to go wrong whenever. But what constitutes right is very liquid and fluid, and it always.
Very subjective.
Yeah,
It all depends on who benefited, really.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hmm.
As usual, I think we've solved a lot of the world's problems here tonight.
Yeah, we did. Well, we certainly did more than most politicians ever have.
Yeah,
And you didn't even have to vote for us. But hey, you could like this video and share it and subscribe to the channel. I mean, that'd be just like voting.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you could say maybe, hey, we should nominate these guys to be you know uh council of presidency or something. you know
Well, at least we're gonna argue the point and try to bring it down to its the most simplest pieces, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
the top of anything should always be two people, so there can always be a conversation.
Well, that's true, and that is one problem. Like, I have with the president is like, it's kind of like a king,
Pretty
but
much.
not.
Yeah. Checks
Um,
and balances are demonstrably failing. So
yeah, and that's one of the problems I have. Oh man, we're already an hour in, so
yeah.
I think it's probably a good time to end. But yeah, that is a huge problem. Like the I don't think the office of president was ever meant to be that powerful. Um, Yet again, though, I think power is elusive. I don't think anybody has any actual power. Um, it's it's all fake. But um, Congress, they have way too much control of things. The court system, oh, man, Jesus, yeah,
Power is influence, and influence is gained with money. And, like you can just draw a line from this to that and point the finger. But yeah.
yeah, but even the most expensive advertisement has to compel me to believe what somebody's saying, and if they're ineffectual, I'm just gonna be like, well, that's
Well,
dumb.
all it need, all it needs is to be repeated enough
That's
time.
true. Yeah, well, okay, so all we have to do is encourage everybody to think critically. um but I think that's actually what we really do on this show.
Yeah. Well, if the prime directive were to constantly be making things better, uh,
Yeah.
I think that would actually encourage critical thinking.
Hmm.
If if people saw that as the first thing rather than their free speech, or like if they saw a call to action rather than this is what you deserve to have when you're born, I think they would feel like they have to do something to earn their keep.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I think being a person on this little tiny rocky ball in the middle of space, like me, I'm a freedom-minded person, but I'm also a humanitarian, and I do what I can to take care of other people, and I think that's something that's really important. Um, I just wish more people did that. Um, yeah, God.
Well, maybe we should ask the listeners and the viewers what their idea of liberty is, and how they would like to I don't know, burn it down and start it over. What do you think would be the right way to go about doing things?
Yeah, or is there even a right way?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something going back to the whole, like, you have a conceptual principle. You have principles that you build
Right.
everything on,
Yeah,
and
like the
then
right way is going to be a concept instead of an edict.
yes, because I think the edicts spawn corruption,
Yeah.
um, and
And ambiguity.
yeah, actually, that's a really good point to end on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I definitely like to hear what other people have to say about that, like different ideas and things. I mean, I think in this regard, for sure, it's critical to analyze other people's ideas and thoughts and wants and needs and things like that. Um, Maybe we might not be, you and I, Casey, might not be in like some kind of position where we can like dictate what happens, but we can still influence people and make a difference. And I my hope is that it will be positive. Um, and yeah, I'd like to hear what other people have to say because I think it's really valuable. Um, yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. That's it. That's good. I've had enough beer now, I think.
Yeah. I ran out of beer, so
Ah, bummer.
uh, I feel my liberties have been trounced upon by my lack of beer.
Well, here I got another beer for you right there. Sorry, I can't pass it through the web.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Well, eventually we'll be able to do that.
All right, well, don't forget to stick around for the song. Thanks for deep sea diving with us in the Liberty.
Yeah. This is a good one. All right. Keep the conversation going, and have a good night, everybody.